Hi, Rommel, and thank you so much for coming as a guest on the AI ML show.
Thank you, Swati. Thank you for the invitation. And I think this is a great opportunity to talk about AI ethics and a lot of interesting news on this area.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm fascinated by all the work that you're doing in Peru and South America, I guess, in that region. And I'm not very sure I know a lot about that, what is happening there. But I want to start off with your career journey. I noticed that you are a lawyer. So tell me a little bit about how did you get into AI from being a lawyer?
Well, okay. To begin, I started my career as a lawyer in working on telecommunication regulation and the access to public services. But from that point, I made a change on my career. I started to see more things related with privacy, with all everything that it's connected with cookies, with data protection, with cybersecurity. And at that time, I made an kind of a strange specialization on behavioral economics that makes me realize that humans, tend to be less rational than I used to think when I was a law student. And that connection with my interest with how organizations, companies, and even people handle that data make me more interested in artificial intelligence and overall with how you use data to make algorithms work. So that's how I started to be interested in this field. And although it was not exactly ethical AI as I am now, I began to develop this interest. But after some time, I'm talking approximately about 2014, 2015. So there was no a lot of legal development about how to regulate AI. Actually, the recent developments in this area is from last year and this year. And so I started to see how societies can try to regulate the changes that are produced by AI. And then I discovered this whole area of ethics and AI. First, not the ethical aspect of how to handle data ethics, and also a lot of a field in the legal profession that is linked to digital rights. So that's how I started to begin in this area, and a lot of things that is going in this area.
Awesome, awesome. So tell me a little bit about of what is going on in Peru. What are some projects that you're working on? Is there a lot of applications of AI in Peru that you are involved in?
Well, I am currently the executive director of an NGO, Peruvian NGO called Empathy Lab, and our work is basically as the promotion of digital rights and digital ethics. And we also do a bit of research on the social attitudes towards AI. Actually, one of the projects I'm working on right now is to survey and try to understand more the perception of young people, especially students, towards the use of AI on their classes and to review their exams. So, and we started doing this project because of some news about the bad reaction from the students and educate about the application of AI algorithms to be accepted into university. So I think this is new field, at least in Latin America. There is not a lot of research in this area, and we're doing this now. And our project is also to cooperate with the government because at least in Latin America, a lot of countries do not have yet a national strategy on artificial intelligence. Only in Chile, Colombia, Brazil, and Uruguay, they have, but this is some progress from last year. They have more work about a national strategy or plans about how to use AI to promote economic growth. So right now we're actually trying to make our work in favor of digital inclusion in Peru and regarding AI literacy, because
Mm-hmm.
like most of Latin American countries and most of South uh, uh, of countries that are part of the global South, we do not have a lot of AI engineers or
Mm-hmm.
people that is involved. So we try to promote these areas and increase that interest, and increase the engagement with this field.
That's amazing that you're working with students, right? So they have a path to look forward. At the same time, think about the ethical outcomes of AI as well. That's amazing. So I know recently in the last 2 months, a lot of regulations have been published, from, especially from EU. Actually, the last 1 month. So tell me a little bit about what is exciting to you. Do you think the regulation that's coming up from the West will reach the global South and Latin American countries?
Well, it's a bit of mixed feelings actually. And when we, I think a good example to view the impact of the EU proposal, the AI Act, is what happened with the GDPR. The
Mm-hmm.
GDPR has a lot of implications, legal implications, and business implications around the world, even Latin America. But
Mm-hmm.
it may be, some argue, it may have a negative impact on small business if they
Mm-hmm.
want to reach their European market.
Mm-hmm.
For a big company, there's actually it's a cost they can afford, but for
Mm-hmm.
small business, not so much. So that's on the economic side, but it also has positive aspects as it creates a lot more of rights for citizens, like the right of explanation. You
Mm-hmm.
actually have the right of explanation with the GDPR, and that
Mm-hmm.
makes a citizen being able to ask for a company to try to give them the information about how their algorithms or their decision making process works. And and now with the EU proposal, what's happening is they are using a risk approach about AI applications. That means that in some user cases there will be more restrictions and more requirements to for companies to use AI than in other spaces. And one of the high risk situations are, for instance, in the judicial the system, and to use AI in this area, and the use of biometric tracking, and
Mm-hmm.
finally, in the prohibition of social score systems that
Mm-hmm.
are used in China, for instance. So in the case of Latin America, um, the reception is a mixed reception. We are going to see if this proposal is approved, and if
Mm-hmm.
it's approved, I think we have a lot to learn about, especially the risk approach of AI regulation. Because one thing we have in common with European, and I'm talking about from the legal aspect, is that we base most of our regulation on um, the public. The regulation aspect of and its implications with risk, and also the impact it may have on human rights and fundamental rights.
Mm-hmm.
So we are going to learn from the experience of the European Union, but I'm more careful about the prohibitions they are establishing, because um, there are some specific provisions that we need to see if it's going to work for our context. Because, for instance, in Latin America, there is not a lot of formal mechanisms, formal systems to provide people access to money or to services. So
Mm-hmm.
a system that make use your behavior to give you better access of funds or services may be good for our context. So this is something we have to discuss more and learn what are the risks and the benefits for Latin America.
No, that's a good point. I think we have mixed reactions here in the United States as well, because how do we balance innovation with regulation is always the question. And it can't be an umbrella statement for everything. Of course, where it impacts human rights, we do have a valid reason to regulate it, but what is that fine balance is always a question. So tell me a little bit about, have you worked with the government in any of these countries or even Peru? Because
Well, in
yeah.
Peru, we as a part of since last year, as a part of that digital transformation process and the open spaces the Peruvian government create, we work as an NGO with them
Mhm.
as any other organization, and we actually plan to give them our proposals about the AI national strategy that was open for comments last yesterday. So we are going to work just on that, and I think one of our inspirations is a work that was made in Chile, our neighbor country, because
Mhm.
they have this same process of open the AI discussion for citizens, for NGOs. So this gives them more better input for what people think and what people fear about AI. Because most of the times when a citizen that do not have a lot of connection with the AI process and how you learn to extract the value from data, they fear that AI, it's like AI equal to a robot, which is not the
Mhm.
case at all. So
Right.
you have to try to educate and give them. This is not all. This is not actually AI, but AI also has risks for fairness, for biases, and for transparency. Trying to do not use opaque algorithms to try to make this data open data. So that's something we try to engage and to provide information for citizens.
No, that's the same here. I'm sitting in Washington, D.C., in the US, and we did a similar framework where we welcomed all the people from academia, nonprofits, industry, and government officials to collaborate on frameworks. So we did frameworks on how to implement AI systems, but um, we also participated together in one. I was one of the co-authors of an ethical AI framework also for the United States government. So I think similar activities are happening. So that is very encouraging. I think we all have a long road to cover to bridge that gap between what citizens know what is AI and what is actual capabilities, and how sometimes without their knowledge, some unfair practices are being implemented. So that is very interesting. So what are some next steps that you're looking forward to in working on, whether it is educating the public about use cases of AI, or even with your government, what are some AI strategies? Can you talk briefly about that?
Sure. Well, the first is that as Latin America context is be different from the United States of Europe, we have to be very careful with how we handle our own difficulties. For instance, one of the main issues for the Peruvian national strategy on AI, it's how to handle digital inclusion. That means
Mhm.
because we do not have a lot of people who are into data science or AI or all those fields. So we need to provide more information, more access to education, and increase the access for this information, for this knowledge. That's one of the things. And the other one is that um, we need to focus more on how to create trust for AI. For instance, this is just a really strange fact about Peru, but in Peru we have the least amount of trust for other people. I'm talking about just friends or family, we distrust a lot of people. So if we distrust people, it's quite well. I'm not. We do not have yet research about this topic, but intuitively, we may also distrust AI systems. So we need to work a lot about how to create trust on these systems. And one of the things we need to do is to be humble about our cases. So AI will be applied and will meet the expectations we put in these systems, but also to be careful about in which sector we are going to apply AI. For instance, when we talk about justice, the functioning of legal systems, and AI, we have a lot of discussion. We read about the use of AI in the United States with the Compass algorithm. So we really need to be careful about that. So perhaps our first steps is going to just try to use AI to automate documents, but not to alter the process of decision of the judges. So we're going to go step by step by trying to create this trusted relationship between the public officials and the city and the citizens.
No, that makes sense. Whether it is use cases of criminal justice and others, you have to be very careful. So you're on the right move. Any other exciting strategies that you're working on? Do you want to specify something specifically that you cover in the strategies that you're working with the government? Are there specific use cases you have spoken about?
Well, besides education, we plan to try to learn. Actually, I will be traveling to China next year. So we try to be open minded about how they apply AI systems. I'm not talking specifically about the social score system, which is I know it's controversial, but we try to learn how they work because one fact is that there's no one social score system on China. There are a lot of them, and every province have their own particular social score system. So we try to learn about more their experience and try to see if that can work for Peru, which is a Latin American country, and that is in the process of transforming and putting all their process in a digital system. So we trying to do that.
But why would you go towards something that is controversial, like a social scoring system? Do you not think it's going to invade upon privacy, create unjust and unfair outcomes?
Yes, and yes, actually, a lot of the controversy of this system is the high risk privacy, special privacy and fairness of the decisions. But I think we have to see where we are going to be in the next 10 years. So they are building something that may be replicated in other countries. So instead of just creating a ban on this technology, I think it's better to have a better understanding of how they work and what is for instance, their own citizens, what they think about the system. We need to know if they have legitimacy, if people believe in the system, because most of the time when we talk about ethics, although this is all about values, so we need to be careful about is their values aligned with what we want. If not, can we learn a bit about their experience? So I'm trying to use that approach when we talk about the user cases on AI. So try to be a bit open-minded. Although I know it's controversial, it's a controversial application, still want to know more about it.
Just going with an open mind to learn about it, that is very interesting. And I would think the credit score system is a sort of social scoring system, right? If you talk about a credit score, which some countries where I come from, I'm from India, and we don't have a credit score system, whereas in the United States, credit scoring is used for lending of mortgage or personal loans or anything, right? So maybe that is an analogy I can think of, but it always is helpful to be open-minded to learn from, even if it's a faulty system, what do the citizens think about? So I like that approach. So I look forward to your write-ups about it once you come back from China. So any other new and exciting news that you have been hearing? I know we've heard about EU. I know a lot of activities is happening in the Latin American countries. Do you want to share anything else? Or do you have any advice for up and coming, whether it is lawyers or other people in Latin America who want to get into the field of AI or ethical AI?
Yes. Well, for the first part, I think really interesting development is the case of Colombia. Colombia has made a lot of progress. It's one of the pioneers in Latin America when we talk about AI and ethical frameworks. So what they do is they do not use regulation as opposite of an ethical aspects, but they mix it in in a strategy of smart regulation. That means that they have in the same board the business, the citizens, and the government to try to create a common regulatory approach. So that's something if you are interested in Latin America and all of your viewers, it will be interesting to see more about Colombia. And for the other question about my advice is that if you're interested about digital rights, for instance, privacy or access of information or the fairness of a decision, um, you will probably be interested on AI. This is a field that it's happening a lot of progress, a lot of different discoveries all the time. So I think one way to enter to this field is first to know what is happening in your with governmental initiatives in your country. At least on Latin America, all the countries, well, they are behind, but all of them are actually trying to catch with the AI movement. So
Mhm.
first, try to learn what your government is doing, and if you are a lawyer or a legal student, law student, what you should do is to read more about a bit of privacy. You know, the intersection with privacy and AI is quite clear. So maybe in trying to read what it's been discussing about in the European Union or in your country or your neighbors' countries will be good for you.
It's amazing, Rommel. That is always good to read more research papers and what's happening, not just neighbor countries, but throughout the world, right? This conversation is happening right now between you and me, and all the way are from different countries. I think there are some similarities of how we are working with the governments and regulators as well. So thank you so much, Rommel, for your time today. This was a very interesting conversation. I wish you the very, very best.
Thank you, Swati, for having me, and thank you for having this space to discuss and to interact and talk about AI developments, as you said, around the world.
Thank you. Pleasure is mine. Have a good day.
The same. Have a good day.
Bye.